"My friends don't like you. We need to break up," she said. I replied, "Good. Then you can join them." The way her friends looked at her after I left said everything. Sometimes the people closest to you become the biggest threat to your happiness. And I learned that lesson the hard way through my relationship with Tessa. I met Tessa 2 years ago at a wine tasting event in downtown Seattle. I'm Vincent, 32, and I work as a cybersecurity specialist for a tech firm downtown. She was 29, managing social media campaigns for local restaurants, and had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. We bonded over our shared love of indie music and late-night food truck adventures, spending hours talking about everything from obscure bands to the best Korean BBQ spots in the International District. Those first few months felt effortless. We'd spend Saturday mornings at Pike Place Market, buying ingredients for elaborate brunches I'd cook while she documented everything for her food photography portfolio. She appreciated how I remembered small details. The way she liked her coffee with oat milk foam art, or how she always ordered extra pickles on her burgers. I thought I'd found someone who valued the same things I did. Genuine connection, shared experiences, building something meaningful together. After 8 months of weekend adventures and quiet weeknight dinners, we moved in together. My Capitol Hill apartment had space for her photography equipment, and she loved the view of Elliott Bay from the bedroom window. Everything seemed perfect until I started noticing how different she became around her friend group. The first time I met her college friends at Kelsey's housewarming party, I could feel their judgment immediately. Kelsey Williams, her best friend since freshman year, made a point of asking about my boring tech job while emphasizing how Tessa used to date creative types. Her other friends, Sarah, Monica, and Jenna, seemed to view me as some kind of temporary entertainment, constantly referencing inside jokes I couldn't understand, and making comments about how Tessa used to be more fun. Tessa would explain apologetically when I declined their invitations to crowded clubs or expensive wine bars where conversation was impossible. I wasn't antisocial. I enjoyed dinner parties, board game nights, small gatherings where people actually talked to each other. But her friends interpreted my preference for meaningful interaction over loud chaos as some kind of character flaw. The passive-aggressive comments started subtle. Kelsey would express mock surprise when Tessa showed up alone to their weekly happy hours, making pointed remarks about how it must be nice having a boyfriend who controls your social calendar. I tried addressing it directly once during a group dinner, where the conversation kept turning to relationships and how important it was for partners to support each other's independence. When I mentioned that couples should definitely maintain their individual friendships while building something together, Kelsey replied that actions speak louder than words. Tessa squeezed my hand under the table but didn't defend me. That silence spoke volumes about where her loyalties lay and what I was really dealing with. The real problem wasn't my personality, it was that I disrupted their dynamic. This friend group had been inseparable since college, spending every weekend together, taking group vacations, making collective decisions about everything from career moves to dating choices. They'd grown comfortable having Tessa available whenever they wanted, and a serious relationship threatened that arrangement. After social events with them, Tessa started apologizing for my behavior. She'd suggest that the girls thought I seemed standoffish and maybe I could try engaging more next time. When I pointed out that I'd spent hours asking about their work projects and listening to Sarah complain about her dating life, Tessa would insist that I seemed like I didn't want to be there. She wasn't wrong about that last part, but I kept trying because Tessa mattered to me. The breaking point came during a game night at Monica's apartment. I'd brought a strategy board game I thought everyone might enjoy, something that would encourage actual conversation and interaction. Instead, they spent the evening on their phones, half-heartedly playing, while discussing people I didn't know and events I hadn't attended. Jenna complained that the game was too complicated for casual play, while Kelsey made pointed comments about my tech background and tendency to optimize everything. I realized in that moment that nothing I did would ever be good enough for them. If I was quiet, I was standoffish. If I contributed, I was trying too hard. If I planned activities, I was controlling. If I let them plan, I was disengaged. They decided I didn't belong, and every interaction was filtered through that predetermined judgment. The car ride home was tense. Tessa gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, her jaw set in that way that meant she was building up to something. She finally told me that her friends thought I didn't like them, and maybe I could try harder to fit in and show them that I cared about what mattered to her. I pointed out that what mattered to her should be our relationship, not their approval, but she insisted it wasn't about approval. It was about being part of her life. I could see what was really happening, though. Her friends had created an us versus him dynamic, and she was starting to choose sides. The woman who used to light up when I walked into a room was now apologizing for my existence to people who'd never given me a fair chance. That night, lying in bed while she scrolled through group texts about the evening, I realized our relationship was being evaluated by committee, and the committee had already reached their verdict. The final confrontation came 3 weeks later when Kelsey invited everyone to her birthday celebration at some trendy rooftop bar in Belltown. The cover charge was $40, drinks started at $18, and the music was loud enough to make conversation impossible. I politely declined, suggesting Tessa and I could take Kelsey out for a nice dinner the following weekend instead. Tessa exploded, accusing me of never wanting to do anything with her friends and always having excuses about noise or crowds or expense. When I explained that I genuinely didn't enjoy spending money I worked hard for just to stand around shouting over music while her friends ignored me, she claimed they didn't ignore me and that I just didn't make an effort. I asked when any of them had last shown interest in my life, my work, or anything that mattered to me. She couldn't answer. Then came the revelation that shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. Tessa admitted that this was exactly what her friends had predicted would happen, that they'd warned her I would try to isolate her from them. When I pointed out that I'd never asked her to stop seeing them, just didn't want to pretend I enjoyed being treated like an unwelcome guest, she revealed something that made my blood run cold. Kelsey had been recording some of our conversations. Not just overhearing them, but actively recording clips when I'd call or text while Tessa was hanging out with them. She'd been analyzing my word choices to build a case about my supposedly manipulative communication style. A simple text suggesting we grab dinner together instead of going to an expensive wine bar had been reframed as evidence that I was trying to make Tessa feel guilty for choosing them over me. The scope of this violation slowly became clear as Tessa explained how Kelsey had convinced her that my phrasing was designed to be possessive and controlling. Every quiet dinner we'd shared, every declined invitation, every moment we'd spent building our relationship had been dissected and reframed as evidence of my manipulative nature. No wonder Tessa's friends had such strong opinions about our relationship. They'd been fed a carefully curated narrative designed to make me look like an abuser. I tried to make Tessa understand that friends support your happiness rather than sabotage your relationships, but she'd already accepted their version of reality. According to Kelsey's narrative, I was the villain trying to steal Tessa away from her support system. Every text message, every phone call, every casual conversation had been weaponized against me through secretly recorded evidence taken out of context. Tessa defended this behavior as friends looking out for her best interests, insisting that's what friends do. When I pointed out that friends support your happiness rather than build cases against your boyfriend, she countered that I was the one creating conflict by refusing to integrate into her social life. The conversation revealed how thoroughly she'd been programmed to see my reasonable boundaries as character defects. After knowing her friends since college and me for only 2 years, she'd decided that maintaining her friendships was more important than staying in a relationship that caused this much conflict. She told me she couldn't keep doing this. The constant tension, the arguments about every social event, the exhaustion of mediating between me and people she'd known for nearly a decade. When she said that maintaining her friendships was more important than our relationship, something clicked into place for me. I told her that if Kelsey's approval mattered more than what we'd built together, she should be with people who made her feel that way. She looked genuinely surprised, like she'd expected me to plead or bargain, or promise to change my fundamental personality to fit their expectations. Instead, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. After months of feeling like I had to justify my existence to people who'd decided to hate me before they'd even gotten to know me, the idea of walking away felt like freedom. I wasn't going to fight for someone who'd already decided her friends' opinions mattered more than our relationship. Tessa accused me of just giving up, of not fighting for what we'd built together. But I pointed out that I wasn't giving up. I was accepting what she'd told me. Her friends were more important than I was, and I respected that decision. She grabbed her keys and phone, tears starting to form, announcing she'd stay at Kelsey's that night while we both took some space to think. After she left, I sat in our suddenly quiet apartment and realized how much tension I'd been carrying for months. I'd been trying to be someone who could earn her friends' approval, moderating my personality, second-guessing every interaction, apologizing for preferences and boundaries that were completely reasonable. For the first time in months, I enjoyed a peaceful evening without analyzing whether my choices would be judged by committee. My phone buzzed with texts from Tessa throughout the night, but I didn't read them. If she'd made her choice, we were done. I wasn't interested in being someone's backup plan when their primary social group decided to approve of me again. By morning, I'd started packing my things, ready to leave behind an apartment full of memories and a relationship that had become a constant battlefield. If she wanted to choose her friends over our relationship, she could have everything we'd shared and all the memories that came with it. I was done competing with people who'd never wanted me to win in the first place. The woman who'd called me her financial safety net instead of her boyfriend had finally made her priorities crystal clear. Part 3. 2 days later, my coworker Marcus dropped a bombshell that changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. We were grabbing coffee during our lunch break when he mentioned seeing something disturbing on social media. His girlfriend Sarah knew Kelsey from their yoga class and had witnessed behavior that revealed the true scope of what had been happening. Kelsey had been showing people recordings of me and Tessa, claiming they proved I was controlling, but Sarah said when she heard the actual context, it sounded like normal couple stuff taken completely out of context. Marcus showed me screenshots where Kelsey described a recording of me supposedly demanding Tessa come home immediately. But I remembered that conversation perfectly. Tessa had texted me that she was feeling sick at their wine bar hangout, and I'd offered to pick her up if she wanted to leave early. The manipulation was so calculated it made me physically sick. Every text message, every phone call, every casual conversation had been weaponized against me through carefully curated narratives designed to make me look like a controlling manipulator. Kelsey had been building this case against me for months, using edited clips and her own twisted commentary about what my words really meant. Even worse, Marcus revealed that Kelsey had admitted she'd done this with Tessa's other boyfriends too. She had a whole system for sabotaging relationships she didn't approve of, recording conversations and building cases against men, using the same tactics she'd deployed against me. This wasn't spontaneous concern for her friend. It was a deliberate pattern of manipulation spanning years. That evening, I decided to confront Tessa directly about what I'd discovered. She'd been texting me for 2 days, alternating between anger and confusion, clearly torn between missing me and maintaining her position that her friends were justified in their concerns. When we met at that coffee shop on Pine Street where we'd had our first real conversation, the atmosphere felt like a business meeting about to end badly. I told her I knew about the recordings, watching her face go pale as I explained how Kelsey had been secretly documenting our conversations and playing edited versions for the friend group. I showed her the screenshots Marcus had sent, pointing out how normal interactions had been twisted into evidence of manipulation and control. Her mouth opened and closed several times as she processed this information. I watched her piece it together. All the times Kelsey had seemed to know details about our relationship that Tessa couldn't remember sharing. All the suspiciously accurate accusations about conversations her friends couldn't have overheard. When she whispered that Kelsey said she was protecting her, I asked what she needed protection from. Someone who wanted to spend time with her. Someone who'd been making her happy before they convinced her otherwise. Tessa stared at the evidence for a long time, processing this new information. When she finally looked up with tears in her eyes, she said she needed to ask Kelsey about this. I pointed out there was nothing to ask. She'd seen the proof. But even confronted with documented manipulation, Tessa was still giving Kelsey the benefit of the doubt she'd never extended to me. She defended her 8-year friendship over the evidence in front of her, suggesting maybe Kelsey was just worried and made some poor choices. When I explained that secretly recording our private conversations for months and convincing her our relationship was toxic wasn't worry but systematic sabotage, she still couldn't bring herself to accept what the proof clearly showed. We sat in silence for several minutes while she struggled between what she'd discovered and what she wanted to believe about people she'd trusted for nearly a decade. Even when I pointed out that no amount of effort on my part could have overcome a systematically orchestrated campaign against me, she continued making excuses for behavior that was clearly manipulative and wrong. When she said she needed time to process this information, I told her to take all the time she needed. But I also asked her to consider one question. If Kelsey was really looking out for her best interests, why did she need to secretly record us and lie about what she heard? The evidence spoke for itself, but Tessa was choosing to remain willfully blind to what it revealed. I left her sitting in that booth, staring at proof of her best friend's betrayal. Part of me hoped she'd choose truth over convenience, but I wasn't holding my breath. After 2 years of watching her prioritize her friends' opinions over our relationship, I knew where her loyalties lay. The woman who could dismiss documented evidence in favor of loyalty had already shown me who she really was. 3 days later, she texted me that Kelsey had explained everything, and I was twisting the situation to make myself look innocent. That's when I knew for certain that our relationship was over, and I'd dodged a bullet I hadn't even realized was aimed at me. Even confronted with proof of manipulation, she'd chosen the manipulator over the truth. The friend group had created such a powerful us versus him dynamic that Tessa couldn't see past it even with evidence of deception right in front of her. They'd convinced her that questioning their behavior was betrayal, that choosing her boyfriend over their collective judgment was weakness. In the end, she'd rather believe comfortable lies than face uncomfortable truths about people she'd trusted. 3 weeks after our final conversation, Marcus brought me news that revealed the true scope of what had been happening. His girlfriend Sarah had witnessed something at yoga class that changed everything we thought we knew about Kelsey's motivations. Tessa had found something at Kelsey's place that exposed the real reason behind years of relationship sabotage. Kelsey had left her laptop open at Tessa's apartment, and Tessa had discovered a folder full of love letters. Not just any love letters. Letters Kelsey had written to Tessa but never sent, documenting feelings that went back 5 years. Every boyfriend Tessa had during that time, Kelsey had systematically destroyed using the same recording tactics she'd used on me. She'd been in love with Tessa the entire time and couldn't handle losing her to romantic relationships. The calculated nature of it was breathtaking. While I'd been trying to build a genuine relationship with Tessa, Kelsey had been working behind the scenes to destroy it, all while maintaining the facade of a concerned best friend. The letters included detailed plans about protecting Tessa from men who weren't worthy of her, with the most recent entries specifically mentioning me as a threat to their friendship. Marcus explained that the letters outlined strategies to make Tessa see my true character, documenting Kelsey's feelings and her systematic approach to eliminating competition for Tessa's attention and affection. This wasn't about my personality or compatibility with their friend group. It was about removing any romantic rival who might take Tessa away from someone who'd been obsessed with her for years. The pattern went back to college and included details about other guys Tessa had dated. A teacher named David, who Kelsey convinced was using Tessa for emotional support. A marketing guy named Alex, who she claimed was financially irresponsible after she'd manipulated situations to make him look bad with money. Every serious relationship Tessa had attempted, Kelsey had found ways to sabotage through manufactured crises and manipulated evidence. I thought about Tessa's dating history, how she'd always described her past relationships as disappointing, how the guys had all seemed perfect initially but revealed concerning character flaws that her friends had helped her recognize. Now I understood those weren't character flaws, they were carefully constructed narratives designed to end relationships that threatened Kelsey's position in Tessa's life. According to Sarah, when Tessa confronted Kelsey about the letters, she initially tried to claim they were just fantasy, creative writing she'd never intended to act on. But when pressed about specific incidents with Tessa's ex-boyfriends, moments where she'd been the one to point out their flaws or create situations that led to breakups, Kelsey broke down completely. She admitted she couldn't handle sharing Tessa with romantic partners and had convinced herself she was protecting her from men who would eventually hurt her anyway. The friend group had become unwitting weapons in Kelsey's campaign to isolate Tessa from romantic love. Monica, Sarah, and Jenna had no idea about Kelsey's true motivations, but they'd been influenced by her narratives for years, genuinely believing they were helping Tessa avoid bad relationships. When Tessa tried to explain the situation to the rest of the friend group, they turned on her for questioning their loyalty. Rather than examining their role in years of manipulation, they'd chosen to see Tessa as the problem for daring to challenge their collective judgment. They revealed their toxic need to control her personal life rather than support her happiness. That afternoon, my phone rang with Tessa's name for the first time in 3 weeks. Her voice was hoarse as she tried to deliver what she called the biggest apology of her life. She explained how she'd accused me of lying when I'd showed her evidence of manipulation, choosing to believe Kelsey's explanation that I was twisting screenshots and trying to turn her against her friends. She'd found the letters by accident and discovered documentation of feelings and plans to eliminate men from her life so Kelsey could have her all to herself. The letters specifically mentioned me as the biggest threat Kelsey had ever encountered because I made Tessa genuinely happy. She was terrified Tessa would choose me over the friend group, so she'd escalated her tactics. But even with this complete revelation, I couldn't bring myself to consider reconciliation. When Tessa asked if there was any chance we could try again, I had to point out that even if Kelsey manipulated the situation, Tessa still chose to believe her over me when it mattered most. She'd seen evidence of deception and decided I was lying about it. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we'd lost and everything that couldn't be repaired. When she whispered that she understood, I realized she finally grasped that some choices can't be undone. After she hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief about discovering I'd dodged a much bigger bullet than I'd realized. 2 months after Tessa's confession call, my life had settled into a rhythm I genuinely enjoyed. I'd started dating Kara Mitchell, a graphic designer I'd met at a cybersecurity conference, where she was presenting on user interface security. She was brilliant, funny, and most importantly, appreciated my thoughtful nature instead of seeing it as a character flaw requiring constant apologizing and explanation. The contrast with my relationship with Tessa was striking from the beginning. Kara valued the same qualities that Tessa's friends had convinced her were problematic. Where Kelsey had framed my preference for meaningful conversation as antisocial behavior, Kara saw someone who wanted to build genuine connections. She loved how I remembered little things and made thoughtful plans instead of viewing these traits as controlling or suffocating. We'd been seeing each other for 6 weeks when Tessa's desperate reconciliation attempts began in earnest. Text messages arrived at all hours. Long paragraphs explaining how she'd discovered the full extent of Kelsey's manipulation and how sorry she was for not believing me when I'd shown her documented proof of the deception. The messages detailed how the friend group had turned on her after she'd confronted them about being complicit in Kelsey's schemes. According to her texts, they'd initially tried to defend their actions, claiming they'd genuinely believed they were protecting her, but when she'd pushed back, they'd ostracized her completely. Monica told her she was ungrateful for questioning people who'd only tried to help her, while Sarah claimed she was rewriting history to justify choosing a man over her friends. When text messages didn't work, Tessa escalated to phone calls that I let go to voicemail. The messages became increasingly frantic as she detailed how Kelsey had completely poisoned the friend group against her, claiming Tessa was having some kind of breakdown and that discovering the letters had made her paranoid and delusional. They had chosen to believe Kelsey's version where Tessa was the unstable one rather than admit they'd been manipulated for years. The situation took a disturbing turn when Tessa showed up at my office building. My company has tight security, so she couldn't get past the lobby, but she waited outside for 3 hours until I left for lunch. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping, like the discovery of Kelsey's betrayal had broken something fundamental in her worldview. She told me she was desperate, that I wouldn't answer her calls or texts, that she'd lost everything when she discovered the truth about her closest friendship. She explained how she'd lost 8 years of friendship when she'd confronted them about their role in destroying her relationships, and that I was the only genuine connection she'd had. But I could see that her desperation stemmed from losing her other options, not from genuine regret about her choices. When I told her I was seeing someone else, the graphic designer from my LinkedIn, her face crumpled with a mixture of shock and panic. She asked if I didn't miss what we'd built together, but I pointed out that what we'd built had been systematically undermined by her willingness to choose her friends' manipulated opinions over her own experience of our relationship. The final escalation came when packages started arriving at my apartment. Expensive gifts. A leather messenger bag I'd mentioned liking months ago. Tickets to a concert we'd talked about attending. Even a framed photo of us from happier times with notes about remembering what we'd built together. Cora was remarkably understanding about the harassment, but I could see it was starting to wear on both of us. When I finally called Tessa to demand she stop the gifts and surprise appearances, she tried one last manipulation tactic. She suggested I wasn't exactly the forgiving type when I refused her attempts at reconciliation, trying to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. Even in defeat, she couldn't resist attempting to manipulate me into feeling bad about protecting myself. After blocking her number and changing my work schedule to avoid any more surprise appearances, the harassment finally stopped. A month later, through Marcus's girlfriend Sarah, I learned that Tessa had left Seattle entirely. The fallout from the Kelsey situation had made staying in the city too difficult. Too many people knew the story. Too many social circles had been contaminated by the drama. I felt a mixture of relief and genuine sadness. Relief that the harassment had ended, but sadness that someone's life had imploded so completely. Even though she'd chosen poorly during our relationship, I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, but I also knew I'd made the right choice in refusing reconciliation. The woman who'd thrown away our relationship based on manipulated evidence wasn't someone I could trust with my heart again, regardless of the circumstances that had influenced her decisions. She'd had multiple opportunities to choose truth over manipulation, and each time she'd chosen the path that required less courage and self-examination. Some people learn from their mistakes, but others just find new ways to avoid taking responsibility for them. 6 months after blocking Tessa's number, I thought the drama was finally behind me. Kara and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Weekend trips to nearby mountains, quiet dinners where we actually talked, instead of performing for an audience, building the kind of relationship I'd always wanted. Then we walked into Victrola Coffee on Capitol Hill for our usual Saturday morning routine. And everything exploded again. Kara was at the counter ordering our drinks while I found a table near the window. The same spot where Tessa and I used to spend weekend mornings working on our laptops. Back when I thought we were building something permanent. I was checking emails when I heard a familiar voice behind me and turned to find Tessa standing 3 feet away. She looked like she'd lost 20 pounds and aged 5 years. Her hair was shorter, darker, and she had that hollow look of someone who'd been through hell and hadn't quite climbed back out. She couldn't believe I was there, mentioning how this used to be our place where we'd sit and plan our weeks together. I could see other customers starting to pay attention as her voice got louder. What followed was a painful public confrontation, where Tessa loudly proclaimed that she'd figured everything out. About Kelsey, about the manipulation, about how she'd been programmed to destroy our relationship. But more than that, she insisted I was the only man who'd ever really loved her for who she was, pointing directly at Kara and declaring she was just a rebound, a consolation prize because I couldn't have her. The audacity of it took my breath away. After months of harassment, after choosing her manipulative friends over our relationship, she was claiming ownership of my emotions and dismissing my current relationship as meaningless. When Kara approached with our coffee cups and politely introduced herself, Tessa made it clear she considered herself more important due to our history and connection. Tessa insisted that what we'd had was deeper than anything I could build with someone I barely knew, positioning herself as the real love, and Kara as a temporary placeholder. She suggested I was settling for someone safe and convenient instead of fighting for what we could rebuild together, using psychological manipulation to undermine both my feelings for Kara and Kara's confidence in our relationship. The coffee shop went quiet around us as Tessa's desperation became more obvious. Even the barista stopped grinding beans as she demanded I tell Kara that what we'd had was deeper than anything I could build with someone I barely knew. Other customers were openly watching now, some recording with their phones, realizing this confrontation was about to become social media content. Kara handled herself with remarkable composure, calmly explaining that Vincent and I were very happy together and had been building something real for months. When Tessa suggested this was built on rebound emotions and fear rather than passion, Kara pointed out that Vincent chose her because they were compatible, shared values, and because she supported who he was instead of trying to change him. The truth of Kara's words hit home, and I could see Tessa's expression shift from anger to something that looked like panic. When she grabbed my arm, begging for just 5 minutes alone to explain everything she'd learned, I gently removed her hand and told her there was nothing left to explain. I'd moved on with someone who valued the same things I did. As we gathered our things to leave, Tessa's final desperate cry revealed everything wrong with her approach. She shouted that I'd regret this, that I'd realize what I'd lost and it would be too late. Even in this moment, she was focused on competition and comparison instead of genuine growth or understanding of why our relationship had failed. Later that day, Marcus texted me a link to a TikTok video someone had recorded of Tessa's outburst, posted with the caption about exes who can't accept you've moved on. The comments were brutal. Hundreds of people calling her desperate, crazy, embarrassing. But the worst part was seeing a comment from Kelsey Williams, mocking Tessa's breakdown and claiming she'd predicted this would happen eventually. Even after everything she'd done to sabotage Tessa's relationships, Kelsey was still publicly humiliating her former friend. The friend group that had enabled years of manipulation was now participating in mocking the person they'd helped destroy. The manipulation had come full circle. The very people who'd convinced Tessa to abandon genuine love were now abandoning her in her moment of complete vulnerability. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, clearly from Tessa using someone else's phone. She apologized for the scene I'd witnessed and claimed she was getting help and wouldn't contact me again. Part of me hoped she was telling the truth about getting help, but a bigger part of me was just relieved that our story might finally be over. 1 year later, I was standing on a ridge overlooking Mount Rainier, holding an engagement ring and planning the most important conversation of my life. Kara was photographing the sunrise, completely unaware that I'd been carrying the ring for 3 days, waiting for the perfect moment. We'd driven up for a weekend camping trip, something that had become our favorite way to disconnect from the city and reconnect with each other. When she turned around and saw me on one knee, her face went through every emotion possible in about 3 seconds. Joy, surprise, tears, laughter, and finally pure happiness as she said yes without hesitation. The ring fit perfectly, and we spent the next hour talking about our future while watching the sun illuminate the mountain peaks around us. No drama, no external pressure, No friends telling her she was making the wrong choice. Kara loved how I'd proposed no audience, no performance, just us in a place that mattered to both of us. I told her I'd learned something from my last relationship about the difference between genuine moments and social media moments. We drove back to Seattle engaged, planning a small ceremony for the following spring with just immediate family and closest friends, people who'd supported our relationship from the beginning. 3 months after our engagement, I got unexpected news about Tessa through the usual grapevine. Marcus's girlfriend Sarah had heard through her yoga network that Tessa had moved to Portland, started therapy, and was slowly rebuilding her life away from the toxic social dynamics that had defined her 20s. She'd apparently cut all contact with that friend group and started completely over with a new job and apartment. 2 weeks before our wedding, I received a LinkedIn message that made my stomach drop initially, but actually demonstrated genuine growth. Tessa had heard about my engagement through mutual connections and wanted to send congratulations while apologizing one final time for how she'd handled everything between us. She explained that she'd been in therapy for 8 months, working on understanding why she'd chosen manipulation and external validation over genuine love. The message wasn't manipulative or demanding like her previous communications. She took full responsibility for losing the best relationship she'd ever had because she was too insecure to trust her own judgment over other people's opinions. She wasn't reaching out for reconciliation or anything that would interfere with my happiness. She just wanted me to know she'd learned to recognize what she'd had and hoped Kara appreciated the thoughtful, caring man she was marrying. I showed the message to Kara, who read it with interest rather than concern, noting that it actually sounded like genuine growth. When she asked if I wanted to respond, I thought about it for a long moment. The woman who'd written that message sounded like someone who'd done real work on herself, but she was also someone who'd had the chance to choose growth during our relationship and had chosen differently. I decided not to respond, believing some chapters are meant to stay closed. Kara agreed this was wise. I could appreciate Tessa's growth without reopening communication. Our wedding day was everything I'd hoped for. Small, intimate, meaningful. Kara looked stunning in a simple dress she'd chosen because she loved it, not because it would photograph well for social media. During our first dance, Kara thanked me for waiting for her, and I told her thank you for being worth waiting for. 6 months into marriage, we bought a house in Ballard with a view of the sound and space for the home offices we both needed. We adopted a rescue dog named Charlie who had anxiety issues but responded well to patience and consistency. The final chapter came a year and a half after our wedding, when Marcus mentioned that Sarah had run into Tessa at a coffee shop in Portland, where she was with a man who seemed genuinely kind and attentive. Sarah said she looked really healthy, like she'd found some peace, and the guy treated her like she mattered in a normal way, not like she was some prize he'd won. When Tessa asked about me, just how I was doing and if I seemed happy, Sarah mentioned I was married and had bought a house. Tessa smiled and said she was glad I'd found what I was looking for. That response told me everything I needed to know about her growth. She'd finally learned to value genuine happiness over possession and competition. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right by building the life you always knew you deserved. Tessa had taught me to recognize manipulation, but Kara had taught me to recognize real love. The qualities that had made me boring to Tessa's friend group were exactly what made Kara feel secure and cherished. In the end, that made all the difference.